Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 8 of the Rubbish Talk podcast with myself, Heather Beattie.
And myself, Alistair Meldrum.
So we've got a really interesting episode this week. We sit down with Jenny Grant from Renewable Energy Association, and she works within composting and anaerobic digestion. So she talks in detail about her role, the organisation, and everything else she does and how she ended up in the industry. So before we get to that, as usual, Alistair and myself are going to run down a few news topics that we've picked up on, things we've noticed, or anything in the news for the last week or so. So I'll kick off with one, Alistair, that we discussed, and as usual, I went and done my research on, but it's something that we've noticed more and more being out and about, and we thought it was worthwhile to discuss the impact of chewing gum, how much of what we see in the streets and the impact it's having as well on the environment. So I've done a bit of digging, which I didn't know, about chewing gum starting to break down. So obviously a lot of it isn't biodegradable. There is some brands out there now that say they've produced biodegradable gum, but most of it does actually contain plastic, and can take up to 50 years to break down. So I don't know if you knew that, but that's what I found out on my research this week. And then we link to an article as well from Circular Online again, and it done some research, consumer research, and noted that 75% of British consumers would support a ban on plastic chewing gum. So that wouldn't mean banning it altogether, but a movement to these ones that are biodegradable, I suppose. And also, you know, who covers the cost? We talk about it a lot about these waste management issues, who's to cover the cost. And there was a lot of support as well for the chewing gum brands to pick up the cost of clearing it from the streets. And this supports a lovely blog that you wrote for us, because you were on a jaunt in Glasgow and took some lovely pictures of the ground,
Oh, chewing
as
gum.
usual. There's between pictures of bins and pictures of the ground and sides of roads. But yeah,
I
it's
was
really
actually
noticeable.
almost going to take pictures of bins that day as well, but I thought no, I had to go and catch a train to get home. So
That's too much for one day.
I was in Glasgow at the weekend and I wandered up Sauchiehall Street and I was
Mm,
thinking, it was quite a nice spring day. The trees were in bud, etc., etc. But when you look at the pavement, you just think, how dirty and horrible is it? And
yeah.
it's partly because of chewing gum, partly because it's not been swept properly, partly because it's not been cleaned.
Hmm.
And you think it took me back to university days when I moved to Glasgow. I stayed in Baird Hall, so I used to walk from there to Strathclyde University. And what was happening with Sauchiehall Street was actually being pedestrianised, so it wasn't.
Hmm.
But I used to have traffic flowing down that section, and they were relaying it all and making it all nice. And you look at it now, and when you actually look at it, the paving's actually in quite good condition, but it's just dirty and unkept looking, and that's
Hmm.
what got me thinking. And then I spotted a Glasgow City Council put a sign saying, we bin our gum in Glasgow or something, and I'm like, well, by the looks of the pavement, we
You
don't,
don't,
because
yeah.
it's all over there. But again, that gets you thinking about, who's responsible for that? Is it the user that's dropping the chewing gum? They shouldn't be doing that. But where do the chewing gum manufacturers, the resellers, where do they take the responsibility? They're putting something on the market that's got a lasting impact on the environment, and maybe we need to be a bit more, have some sort of fund that they pay, some
Hmm.
sort of, not so much a DRS, but an extra fund that gets paid into to allow to provide finance for companies cleaning chewing gum off, because it takes a lot of time and effort to actually clear chewing gum off the streets. So
Yeah.
it was just one that I noticed, and I knew that I'd seen that circular economy,
Hmm.
circular online article about it. That it's maybe one that needs a bit more attention. In Scotland we've banned the plastic forks and banned the plastic spoons. Maybe we need to start thinking what we're doing about chewing gum.
Yeah, I think so. I think until you sent me the pictures when we were talking about it, and it is wild. Like you just walk along the street, and it's almost like part of what the ground looks like now. You don't quite realise it's not supposed to look like that, because it's just everywhere you look. It's what we're used to seeing, unfortunately. And again, yeah, you think, well, who is responsible for cleaning it up? And yeah, just having a wee look into it as well, and realising not even just how long it takes to break down, but the fact that people are consuming plastic. I mean, I know you don't swallow your chewing gum, but you're it's just, I think, again, all about communication. Like, people don't quite realise what is in these materials and what impact they have. So yeah, it's quite a good one, topical,
Yep.
something that we noticed and thought was worth mentioning. And as usual, I've done a few searches for a bit of stats behind it.
And if any councils are out there have had success about cleaning chewing gum, we'd love to hear from you if you've actually, because I think that's some councils do have squads that go out and clean areas and so on. So if you do have any success, then drop us a note. So the next one we're going to talk about, one of the things I thought about, I got some really good feedback on Simon's podcast that went out. Just people enjoying the fact it was quite a thoughtful, Simon had put a bit of thought into it, and I thought through, lots of stuff at a fairly high level about the industry. But one of the things I always want to reflect on, and I have reflected on, is he mentioned the Glasgow Caledonian Environment Centre that was based at Glasgow Caledonian University, and that was really taken over when Zero Waste Scotland came in. That sort of removed the need for the Glasgow Caledonian Environment Centre. But one of the things that occurred to me was, in a lot of ways, the Caledonian Environment Centre was a real collaborative place, because it involved the academics, it involved the students and the graduates, it involved industry and the councils, and there was a lot of sort of cross-industry support. So when someone needed and problem needed addressed or looked into, there was all these different parts, and I always felt that they got a better solution. Whereas now what we've got a semi-public body of Zero Waste Scotland, and if they need to do something, they either get the staff to do it, or if they can't do it, they'll sub it out to consultant. But they've not got that same level of working with industry, working with councils, and so on. And maybe that's, if we are going to drive forward the circular economy agenda, we need to look at that, the whole approach of how we do it, and try and get a much more collaborative approach to making sure industry, councils, government, and all the various parties are sort of working together. And I thought it was, and I think there's probably people involved in policy at the moment that probably don't remember or don't know about the Caledonian Environment Centre and how it was set up. The other interesting thing was it was actually funded by landfill tax money. So some of the revenue that went into landfills and then landfill tax, that was fed in to actually fund it. So it was quite a good circular way of so waste was going into the landfill, that was generating landfill tax. Some of that landfill tax credit could come in to try and help policy and help the environment in terms of how we manage waste. So that was Simon that had sort of sparked these thoughts and myself in terms of how things work.
Yeah, I think it was really good to listen to Simon talk about it, and yeah, for anyone who didn't, know what it was, or it hasn't been around in the industry when something like that existed, yeah, I think it is really good to reflect back on how much change and positive, outcomes can come from working together. And yeah, I think it's good to hear you reflecting on it, and I'm sure probably people similar to you, Alistair, will have the same kind of fond appreciation of it, and think it's maybe something to look at again to see how we go forward.
Yeah, good.
So what I wanted to talk about, because you sent me a few weeks ago, and I thought it was really good. We've been talking a few times recently. I've just let it lie that you're going to probably get the running in at some point every episode, so we may as well turn it into something useful. But it's also quite relevant as well, because we were talking in the office. Some of the Albion team are taking part in the Glasgow Kilt Walk in a couple of weeks at the end of the month, and we were talking about getting sponsorship T-shirts for the charity we're walking for, and some people already had some, and we were discussing saying, we're going to reuse them, and then it got to a topic that Alistair, you've mentioned quite a lot, is through the running and the competitions you enter, often you get a T-shirt, or maybe a snood, or something that you probably don't need, a wee momentum of the race, which everyone likes to have. But there's this really good initiative which is Trees Not Teas, which they do races. They also do like corporate events and things as well. So they'll, rather than giving you a t-shirt to sponsor the event, they will plant a tree for everyone who enters or everyone who is registered for an event. And you actually got an update from them, didn't you? Oftentimes we're a bit sceptical of these and think, oh, they're not planting a tree, but they've given you some evidence.
The evidence they've given me is that they've sent me a picture with
Yeah.
a picture of a small tree, and they've given me the what 3 words
Yeah,
location.
location.
So I could actually go, and if I wanted, I could go and visit my tree. But I've actually got more than one tree. I think I possess about 50
Backed up a
trees
tree now,
actually.
yeah.
So I would need to go and find out where all my little trees are. But no, it's a great organisation. As Heather said, if you do enter a lot of races, you do end up with potentially a lot of t-shirts, more t-shirts than I could ever wear in my lifetime. And there is an environmental impact of taking these t-shirts. So I suppose where my line is, if it's what I classify as a big race that I actually want the t-shirt, then I'll still take the t-shirt.
Yeah.
But if it's just a local race or a lesser race, then I'll quite often, if the box is available, tick the trees not teas box, and eventually you'll get your little picture of a tree sent through the post to you, or well, not through the post, by email. But the thing you forgot to mention there, Heather, was who are you doing the charity walk for?
Yeah, so the team are walking for Whiteley's Retreat, so a local Ayrshire charity. We worked with them last summer as well. We done our Albion Charity Miles Challenge, and we've worked out quite a lot with them in the past, and got a nice invite along after we completed our challenge last summer. Got to see the facility and what they do. So it's a respite centre for either children and families who are kind of living with or suffering from life-threatening illnesses, and they give them respite, obviously fully funded, for a week, and they've got some lovely apartments and beautiful outdoor space and really well kept gardens, and they've got alpacas and bunnies and play parks and everything on site. So yeah, it's really good. It's a really worthwhile charity. So we do have the links. We've got a group just given for the whole team, and I can put in the comments, and I'll put on the Rubbish Talk website as well, and it's on Albion's social channels. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. It gives us, we're always trying to do some sort of exercise related staff activity as well. So it's 2 great initiatives. We're raising some money, we're all getting out and getting some exercise, and we're getting out there together on a very early start on a Sunday morning at the end of April.
And it's the kilt walk. It's the big kilt walk you're now doing, is it?
Well, now you're making this bit come out and tell us. We've got some of the teams, so we've actually got the kilt walk has 3 different distances. So you've got the full one, which goes from, if I'm right, I think it's Glasgow Green all the way to Balloch Park. So all the finish lines have come together at Balloch Park. Most of the team are doing the Clybank to Balloch Park walk, and then we've got Helena, who's going to be, well, she's pregnant at the time, so she's calling it the wee waddle. She's going to come along with our wee boy, and we've got some of the other team. They're going to bring the kids and possibly the dogs along, the animals along. Some people are going to do the shorter one as well. So yeah, we've got a mix, and we're all going to come together and meet at the end at Balloch Park. So we're looking forward to it.
Good. Sounds like
but you're deserting us for something else.
I am deserting you. I've got a race on in the Lake District that same weekend, so unfortunately I cannot be there. I'll miss all the fun.
And that's hence why we're not doing the longest one, because if Alistair had anything to do it, the whole team would be doing the longest route possible. There would be no say in it. So we've decided to take advantage of the fact that you're not going to be there setting the pace. We'll do what we can manage. So.
There we go. And the other one, moving off the t-shirts and the charity event, one of the other ones I spotted recently was Sheila Best, who is the Waste Services Manager at Perth Council. She put up a post on LinkedIn recently about what they've been quite focused on is a lot of the stuff we've talked about here in the podcast about the public actually using their bins properly and putting the right waste in the right bins. Mm-hmm. And they have I think they've got a sort of 6 rule, I can't remember if it's 5 or a 6 rule thing they used to try and encourage the public and make it a bit easier for them. And where that's not complied with, they will sticker the bins and they'll not lift the bins. But what's happened is that the local papers picked that up and they're giving the waste operations people a little bit of flack. And obviously Sheila's, concerned about that in terms of the violence and aggression against workers, which is a real big issue in the sector. And we've actually got, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have some quite interesting news about that, about something that's been launched about violence and aggression in the waste sector. It is a big issue. Personally, I think it's great that Sheila and her team are actually doing this work, and it's just a real shame that the press view it as a real negative, that there've been a sort of nanny state and all this different thing, whereas what they're actually doing is say to the public, really, okay, you need to use your food waste, you need to use the bins properly, and that saves the council money and it helps save the environment. And we need to find some way of turning that narrative around. So well done to Sheila and any other council that's trying to fight against, not so much fight against that, but try and put that practice into place, because that's one of the ways we're going to change behaviour. So we'll link.
It was good to see that one. We can put Sheila's full post on, because I know there was quite a lot of engagement on it as well. So it was really good to see her come out and talk about it. And we even talk in this week's episode with Jenny as well, like the difficulty it is to get the communications right, and the balance between like better comms or enforcement. Is that, we've talked about it before as well, how do you enforce these things? It's really difficult. The money's spent and people are in the jobs really trying their hardest to put these programs in place, and we just really need people to use them. So they're doing what they can, and the fact that they're getting some negative press about it is probably really not helpful to the fact that everyone should be coming together and using the media where they can to promote.
Absolutely. One of the other things she mentioned actually was the public wish cycle. So it's almost wishful thinking. It's almost thinking we should be able to recycle. Because in theory you can recycle any material, but it's just what comes down to, is it practically feasible for the council to recycle any material? And that's why generally councils will take out the paper and cardboard, they'll take out the plastics and the metals, but when they say plastics, it will generally be hard plastic. And what sometimes the public do is plastic, therefore the council's bound to be able to recycle that, but in reality that makes the process much more complex and harder to deal with, and is effectively treated as contamination, and it probably wouldn't be recycled. So it's really important to sort of, if you're not sure about what can and can't be recycled, is look at the council website, look at what can and can't go in the bins, and also have a look at the sort of packaging that you've got. If you're lucky enough to live in South Ayrshire Council area, you'll have a South Ayrshire Council My Bins app, which is a Albion environmental product, where it's an app on your phone, and as well as giving you reminders for when your bins are due out. There's a search facility there, so if you type in, for example, glass bottle, it'll tell you which colour of bin that product should go into, or if you type in yogurt pot or whatever, it'll tell you which bin that should go into. So that's been with South Ayrshire Council for almost 2 years now, I think. 2 years. Really good uptake with the public, and that's available for if other councils are interested in that product. We're quite happy talking to them. So that was a sales pitch for the podcast, I'm afraid.
I think that's quite a good way to end it. We're just going to put some plugs in there, and I think that's what we're saying. The My Bins app, it's great. It is a simple process, and we've talked about it. You'll hear on Jenny's episode. It's difficult to get the messaging across when it's different across the whole of Scotland. So every local authority almost has a completely different selection of coloured bins, and they all do different things and mean different things. So we've simplified it as much as possible to the fact that you've got an app on your phone. you search it or you have your colour coded collection calendar. So yeah, shameless plug, but we do think it's good. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And then it's just a reminder for me. I had a listener to the podcast who was very polite and positive about the podcast, but he was accusing me that we were late for our issuing of our podcast, and I was like, no, it's this Thursday, it's this Thursday. So in his head, he thought we were issuing these podcasts weekly. We're not. We're issuing them fortnightly. And that's more just to give us time to do them and so on. We did when we started out. We did think about doing them weekly, but we thought that would be too much. So we're sticking to fortnightly. So if you are expecting weekly podcasts, you'll need to go elsewhere for your the other weeks, because you're only going to get fortnightly from us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it gives us enough time to get some good guests, and we know everybody that gives us the time to sit down and do an interview is really busy, so it just means we're not putting too much pressure on them. But we take the compliment that you want to hear us weekly. You never know. But I think that's everything we talked about this week. We don't want to spend too long because we've got a really good episode with Jenny coming up. So before we go into that, just a few reminders that if you're enjoying the podcast and you are patiently counting down till the next episode, if you subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple or Google, you will get the episodes downloaded and a notification when they go live. And same again, if you check out the Rubbish Talk website, what we're going to do is set up a wee form. So if you want to be on an email newsletter, and we'll not spam you, you'll just get a wee email the same day that the podcast is released, so once a fortnight, with all the episode details, the links that we mention, and obviously a direct link to listen to the podcast. We're going to set that up so you can get it in your inbox if you're waiting patiently for us. So just keep an eye out on that. And same again, if you're enjoying the podcast, then subscribe, like, and share them when they go out, and we'll try and widen our audience a wee bit. But I think that's enough from us, Alistair, for this week. We'll let you listen to Jenny's episode now. Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 8 of the Rubbish Talk podcast. We're going to dive straight in with our guest this week, and we've got Jenny Grant. So hi Jenny, thanks for coming on and joining Alistair and myself.
Thanks very much for having me. Nice to be here.
Great.
Good afternoon, Jenny.
Hi Alistair.
We're going to just dive right in, and better coming straight from yourself, can you tell us and the listeners who you currently work for and a bit of background about the organisation to get started?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, thanks very much for having me on. I've listened to some of the episodes so far and it's been really interesting, so honoured to be asked. I'm Jenny Grant. I'm Head of Organics at the Association for Renewable Energy and Clean Technology. It's a bit of a mouthful, we just normally abbreviate it to REA. We're a trade association, so we represent members who are involved in all sorts of things, particularly around renewable energy and clean tech. And we have members at all different sizes, from sort of very small sole traders right up to some of the multinationals. I deal with the organic side, so please don't ask me any tricky questions about, wind turbines and electric vehicles. I purely deal with organics, so very much focused on composting, anaerobic digestion and use of organics on land. We did sort of originally start out life as the Composting Association, which kind of people, was what it said on the tin. And then as time, things developed and anaerobic digestion came more to the fore as a technology in the UK, we diversified to covering that. We became the Association for Organics Recycling. And then nearly 10 years ago now, actually, we merged with the REA, so which is kind of why we're part of it, because sometimes people sort of say, oh, composting's not renewable energy, why are you involved with that? But that's kind of the history of how it came about. I should also say that's kind of my main role, but I also run my own business. So not that I have a lot of spare time that's not spent with REA, but I do a bit of work, and that's again mostly focused around helping organics recycling companies, help mostly with compliance, so like licensing and also compliance with the industry standards.
That's great, Jenny. I feel as if I've known you for quite a number of years, so I'll not embarrass you or me with the
Too
number of
many.
years, but it's quite a lot of years. How did you actually get into the industry? And I'm actually sitting here thinking, "Do I know this story?" But I'm not actually quite sure. I do know this story.
Well, nearly 20 years, Alistair, so in the industry. Um, my dad was very much involved in the waste and resource sector, and so I kind of grew up a bit with some of that. That was always discussed around the dinner table. It wasn't really my intention, like some of your guests, to come into the industry. I actually did microbiology at university. Was previously involved in the biotech sector. Actually, I was developing lateral flow tests, which at the time nobody knew what
Wow.
they were, but obviously,
Now we
post-COVID,
do.
everyone knows what lateral
Yeah.
flow tests were. Not for COVID, I hasten to add, but it was drug detection lateral flow tests. But really my heart wasn't in it, and I decided to sort of change careers, and I actually got offered a job in the biotech sector, and at the time my dad was running a consultancy, and he persuaded me to join the family business instead, and kind of that's how I ended up in the sector. I started off very much focused on the composting side, because obviously my microbiology background, there's synergies around the biological treatment, and kind of took it from there, really.
Right. No, that's good. It's interesting you mentioned microbiology. When I left school, I actually wanted to do that. Seemed to be I wanted to do microbiology or biology, but I took a wee detour and never actually did it. So when you mentioned that, there's somebody that's done it, and I never got to do it. And I'm not quite sure why it interested me so much. I think I just quite liked biology at school and like that aspect.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I did love that and at university, I really enjoyed it, but I think just the job roles were very much, sort of research lab focused, and for some of the real life stuff.
Yeah. And out of your roles that you've had, any favourite projects, any favourite roles you've had that you've done, or bad projects you've done, and you think never again?
Well, I guess there's been lots of challenging stuff, particularly around, policy developments and regulation. I think one of the most rewarding things over the years has probably been, where I've been involved with the project right from sort of the start, the initiation of thinking, right, actually I want to set up a compost site, or I want to set up an AD plant. And I've been involved with, permitting and planning, and right through to actually when I tend not to get so involved with the, any of the construction side of things, but right through to actually when they're actually, accepting in waste and producing, the valuable outputs. So I think that's probably been one of the most interesting and rewarding things, and I've learned a massive amount from people over the years in various projects. I think probably one of the most fun things is the engagement with industry. So I do quite a lot of organising events for members, and help facilitate sharing information and networking, and the people are really what make the industry, and there's so many lovely people in the organics industry. I've learned a massive amount from loads of them, and it's always good fun when we get together, and people are willing to share best practice, and what's worked, what hasn't, and so that's probably one of the things I enjoy most about my job generally. Stressful organising events, but once it actually happens, it's good. Yeah.
I can certainly vouch for your Scottish conference with your dinner.
Yeah.
The dinner is certainly a very enjoyable evening.
Yeah. We usually do a Scottish one, and we have a sort of UK wide one as well. Which was just a couple of weeks ago, so managed to recover from that. It was good fun.
How do you find, I'm going slightly off topic here, how do you find the differences in the four nations? Obviously REA covers the four nations in terms of compost and AD. Is there much of a difference how things are dealt with, or is it fairly similar across the four nations?
So mostly my experiences with Scotland and England, maybe less so Wales and Northern Ireland, but no, there are definite differences, particularly around the policy. So some people in England think, Scotland's more advanced in terms of our policy around the, mandatory collections of food and garden waste, or food waste particularly, because that's been in place in Scotland for a number of years, whereas, everyone in England is desperate for government to, actually spit out when it's going to happen, because it is going to happen, but we just don't have a date on it. So I think the policy is different, and you sort of always have to be clued up. A member will ask me a question, I always have to say, where are you? Where are you based? So I know what I'm talking about. And the regulators are quite different as well. So some of the regulations that sites have to comply with, but also sometimes the interpretation. So sometimes the regulations are the same, but they're interpreted slightly differently in different countries of the UK. But
yeah, just to make it even more complicated than that actually should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And especially, for our operators who've got sites in different countries in the UK, it must be massively difficult job to keep on top of everything.
Yep.
Yeah, so Jenny touched a wee bit on it when we introduced you at the start, but do you want to kind of go into a bit more detail about what your current role is and what you're trying to achieve with it?
Yeah, sure. So as a trade association, we're there really to represent our members and to try and shape policy and regulation so that it works well for them, so that, really my objectives are always that we make the best use of our organic resources. So try and make sure we're capturing as much of the food and garden waste as possible, obviously make sure it's being treated effectively, and then actually proper recognition of the use of the recycled organics when it's applied to land. So, food waste is a massive contributor to climate change, so that's obviously a big focus that we've got at the moment. It's contributes to 8 to 10%, I think, of the man-made greenhouse gas emissions. So the more we can make sure that we're capturing that and treating it properly, the better. So that's really one of the biggest things in current role, but it is pretty varied, which is what I really enjoy. No 2 days are the same, so we're focused on the waste coming in, but we're also looking at the outputs. So the outputs from composting and AD plants being digestate and compost, and then these are used on land. So we want to make sure that they're used effectively, in the right way, spread appropriately at the right times when they're needed. We want to make sure that part of my role is dissemination of information as well as trying to shape it. So we want to make sure, members are aware of what they're required to do. And then I would like to be a bit more wider recognised about the benefits of these materials, because it's something that's started, and certainly the recent increased cost of fertilizers as a result of what's happening worldwide and Ukraine have really driven a bit more focus onto that. Farmers are obviously looking at what alternatives there might be for buying chemical fertilizers, and compost and digestate could be a brilliant source of those nutrients. Lots of benefits to soil health. So I kind of work at both ends of the process, the feedstocks and then also the outputs as well.
Yeah.
I think one of the sorry, Heather. One of the things I know, one of the compost producers I do a bit of work for, Charles Gray. His argument was always it's not just the fertilizer value of the compost, it's the structure it adds to the soil, which then has numerous benefits that they can't really quantify as such. It's difficult to quantify the how that improves the soil and just regenerates the soil.
Yeah, that's where compost and digestate differ a bit actually. So digestate from an AD plant is really high in lots of readily available nutrients to the plant, so it is more of a like for like substitute with chemical fertilizer. Compost is more of a soil improver, so yeah, as you say, it's if you're, talking to a farmer, you're probably not going to sell it on the nutrient content alone, but the benefits that it brings are massive actually, and it can benefit soil in so many different ways, and it's a really good source of organic matter. And not such an issue in Scotland, but there's lots of areas in the UK where organic matter has been seriously depleted, and those soils really need more organic matter, and compost is a brilliant source of that. As you say, it can help the soil structure, so it can make fields easier to plough. It can help mitigate against erosion. It can help easier to deal with flooding. There's tons of benefits. It can also help sequester carbon in the soil. It's not a permanent carbon store, so sometimes it's not very well recognised because it's a transient carbon. But yeah, there's loads of benefits for compost. I mean, I've probably talked to you all day about the benefits of compost.
Am I right in thinking I saw something recently about gardeners, B&Q and so on, selling peat? That was going to be phased out, and obviously they were going to be, the olden alternative would have been compost. Has that ban been delayed or something? Did I read recently or hear recently?
So it's peat for use in the amateur horticulture sector has been banned in England. There's a consultation out at the moment, actually, with the Scottish Government about whether Scotland are going to do the same. What's been delayed is the ban on use in professional horticulture. So
right, okay.
That's the thing that's been potentially, kicked down the road a little bit, whilst they're still doing some research. Because yeah, as you say, we've been heavily reliant on peat in growing media for years. It's a reliable, consistent product. It performs well. It's been cheap historically. I mean, cheap financially, obviously not cheap in terms of the impact it has on the environment. But there are lots of other alternatives. So there's been lots of studies done in the past looking at compost being a suitable part replacement for peat. I don't think it's ever going to be the full thing, but and there's lots of work going on to look at different materials. I think where the sort of organic sector sometimes struggles is with consistency. If you're putting something in a bag and obviously selling it in B&Q or the garden centre, people want it to be consistent quality, and ultimately it's a seasonable, variable process. And so I think there is still huge potential for compost to be used. And I think probably the general public, they just go to the garden centre and buy a bag of growing media, and they don't really give a second thought as to what's in it.
Yeah. And for people that might not know, what is the environmental impact from peat or use of peat?
Well, it's the extraction from peat. It's a massive carbon store, and digging up the ground releases all that, let alone the the ecosystems and everything, natural habitats that it supports. So yeah, I think I saw a quote on Twitter that was like, better in the bog than in the bag, which I quite like.
That's good, yeah.
That reminds me of the quote, I think it was you, Jenny, that did at a recent conference about what is it, we owe our livelihood to 12 inches of soil and the fact that it rains. You could probably describe it better than I can, but
that is one of my favourites. Despite all our accomplishments, we owe our existence to a 6-inch layer of topsoil and the fact that it rains. And I think most people probably don't, realise that soil plays such an important role in producing food, let alone all the other things in terms of climate change. But 95% of our global food production, I think, relies on soils. If we don't look after them, we're stuffed.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you talk about it, because I think a lot of the time when we either have people on or talk within the industry, you think it's quite far removed. Well, people might think externally it's quite far removed from anything they would impact their daily life, but even just a couple of sentences there, you talk about the things people buy from the shops or the food that they look at, and now you see it all over the news in terms of increasing prices and fertilizers and everything. Like you don't quite realize the involvement that especially what you're doing has on everyone's day to day. So it's really interesting to hear you kind of break that down. I think people listening will then just have a wee light bulb moment hopefully and say, oh wow, okay, that is going to affect me. I've seen that happen in the changes and now I understand why. So it's good to hear the explanation. And I suppose moving on from that, similar topic, we always ask people, which, as you said at the start, kind of runs in the family and to be in the sector and understand. So I can only imagine this will be a yes to this question, but do you think your role and your involvement in the sector has changed either your opinions or your habits outside of the workplace as well, and just kind of how you live everyday life?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, growing up with my dad being involved in the waste sector was definitely always very conscious of things, and particularly on the organic side of things. We had a compost bin at home always, and being very aware of that. I guess, the involvement with the wider waste sector has really, particularly over recent years, made me more aware of some of the other things, like particularly about the impact of consumption. There's been a lot of reports about that, how we're all basically consuming too much stuff in general. So that, I think, recently has definitely changed my habits. I try to buy pre-loved clothes wherever possible. Even my daughter's like well into the, charity shop rummaging and buying things, pre-loved online. My daughter's 12, so we're kind of past the sort of prime consumption stage for kids, when they're getting all the plastic tat. But very conscious and trying to, we really try to gift experiences rather than stuff, at Christmases and birthdays. So I would say, it definitely has changed kind of, how I live generally. And I think I've definitely seen more interest from other people as well. I've got a group of friends from school, and we've got, various WhatsApp chats, and I always used to joke that nobody had useful jobs, nobody was a plumber or a car technician, or, everyone's, I do have a friend who's a physio, and so she used to get all the, oh, I've hurt my back or I pulled a muscle. But actually, lately, over the past few years, the number of messages I've had saying, what bin do I put this in? What happens to this? Is it really important that I take the cap off my wine bottle before I put it in the recycling? And so I've been quite surprised, actually, at how, there's more awareness, and either that people are just bored of my recycling chat, I'm not sure. But I think people are interested. One of the things I was going to mention as well is tea bags.
Don't go there, Jen. That's on a list of topics. That's
all right, okay.
You're on you go. You explain it.
Tea bags, so most local authority food waste collections will say, put your tea bag in your food waste. Until quite recently, tea bags are basically made of plastic or have plastic in them. So I did have a few years where I went round, every time I was at someone's house and made me a cup of tea, I said, no, don't put your tea bag in your food waste bin, put it in your residual. And they say, well, but why? It tells me to put it in my food waste bin. I said, but it's got plastic in it, and it's quite hard to remove. Now we're definitely seeing change because there's a lot more biodegradable tea bags on the market. So, I would say if it's biodegradable, you can put it in your food waste bin.
I think so few people know about that, though, Jenny. So few people know about that one.
Yeah.
The other one in a similar vein is the labels and apples and things. Because quite often they're a bit of plastic, and if a bit of fruit's gone bad, it'll go in the food waste bin, and it'll probably go in with the label. And what people don't realise is that's then getting applied to the land, and you're just got this cycle of plastic contamination. So it's something our members have to deal with all the time. And if it was only tea bags and fruit stickers, they'd probably be delighted. But it's that on top of everything else. And they're the hard things to get out because they're very small, obviously. But I mean, there are solutions to these things. There's compostable stuff, and I don't want to really go down the compostable wormhole that you never get out of. But I don't see why things like that, where they're in close contact with food and people are unlikely to remove a sticker, as you say. If your bananas have gone bad, you're just going to sling them in the food waste bin. You're not going to peel the sticker off first. Why don't we just make it compostable so that it could, not cause any contamination when the material is eventually applied to land? But that as you said, that's a bit of a rabbit hole, because some councils, for example, aren't using composting as a treatment, and that material may not break down in anaerobic digestion and so on. So as always with waste management, it becomes more complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely not, there's no easy solution. And, anaerobic digestion plants do have a lot of effort into pulling out, plastic or compostable stuff, both at the front end and, at the back end with the screens. I still think that, for my mind is it's probably unlikely to be 100% effective. And, they've got very stringent rules which they must comply with in terms of the, level of contamination that can be present in the finished product. But if there is anything, if those tiny fragments are compostable, then, they're not going to persist in the soil for years and years, whereas if they're plastic, they are. So I think, compostable is not a solution for everything, but in the right applications, I think even though it might not be composted, I still think there's a good reason to go down that
for
route.
using it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, good. Okay, so all work and no play. What do you do to get away from the? What do you do to get away from the computer? I'm assuming you're home based now, since you're covering the UK. Do you base yourself at home, or are you?
Yeah, yes, yeah, and I've worked from home, even pre-COVID, so well used to it and well set up. Yes, so a lot of it is work, but I have a dog, which is really my savior for getting away from the screen. So she's very good at reminding me that I've been sitting down too long and it's time to go out for a walk. I'm very lucky where I live in Carnoustie, and so we're right by the coast, so I've got a nice beach on my doorstep. Often say that to people down south, and I think they're envisaging sort of, sunbathing or like, brilliant sunshine. And actually, in reality, most of the time I've got a waterproof, zipped up to the neck with my hood up. And
You'll get one sunny day a year at Carnoustie, do you know?
Too bad actually, but it's not warm, but it's still lovely. So yeah, I spend a lot of time walking my dog. As I said earlier, I've got a 12-year-old daughter, so we've dealt with her clubs and a lot of things that takes quite a lot of time as well. Oh, are you still there?
You're still here, Jenny. We lost you a
Sorry,
wee touch.
I thought I'd lost you.
Yep.
Yeah, so obviously family life takes up a bit of time. My daughter's big into playing the sport of curling,
Right.
so that can take up a bit of time over the winter, taking her to various competitions and things.
And I hope she knows where the curling stones come from.
Yes, she does. Yeah, we did every year we do a day of beaches, which when we basically go to a coastline and visit loads of beaches. And last year we were Ayrshire. So
I was going to say I could see Ailsa Craig out the window. I'd be lying if I said that. I can look in the rough direction, and if it was a bit high, another couple of stories higher, I'm sure I could see Ailsa Craig from the office here.
Well, you've actually both lost me there, because I don't know where the stones come from.
Oh, Heather!
I could learn something here.
Do we need to educate Heather and Jenny?
That big rock that's just off the coast of Ayr.
Oh, I didn't know that at all.
So there's a quarry on Ailsa Craig where the curling stones come from, and they get brought over in a barge to, I think, Girvan they come into, don't they? And then somebody turns them into curling stones. I believe it's the only place in the world or something. It's incredible.
Oh wow, there we go. Well, that's what I've learned today.
That's
I didn't know
your
that.
story. And I was going to mention golf course at Carnoustie. You've got a good golf course, have you not, at Carnoustie?
We have indeed. I'm not a golfer, but I walk across it regularly with the dog. She's very good at finding golf balls. We've got quite a stash.
Yeah.
My daughter plays golf actually. It's really good. The links management in Carnoustie, all local children get free golf lessons.
Oh, great. That's good.
So yeah, I never had the opportunity to do that sort of thing when I was young, but she is. So golf season's about to kick off, and actually curling and golf work really well together, because obviously one's summer, one's winter. So
yeah, that's great.
There you go. Good. And what's next for you career-wise? What you got ambitions? Are you happy at REA?
I think it's quite a potentially hopefully DEFRA actually do what they said they're going to do. It's quite an exciting time to be involved in the industry. There's going to be quite a lot of change over the next few years, particularly in England, with the introduction of mandatory food and garden waste collections. In Scotland as well, obviously we're looking at how to improve the collections we do have, because as you know, and I think you've mentioned before about, we've got food waste collections, but people are still putting food waste in the residual bins. So I think I would really like to stay involved with what I'm doing. I'd really like to see us having high performing collections across the UK, people actually, putting the waste in the appropriate bin. And so I think I'm very keen to, stay involved and sort of see that through. As to what the future holds, I don't really know. I mean, personally, one of the things I'm keen to do is do my fellow application for the CIWM. It's been on my to-do list for a long time. Keeps getting binned for various other more urgent work things, but yeah, that's what I'd like to do.
Just it's about time you did that one, Jenny, I would suggest. I'll start nagging you.
Okay, good.
I think Alistair's going to recruit a whole band of people every time someone mentions it. He's like, yep, just go for it now, go for it now.
Well, I did some professional interviews last week, actually, and it was the first time we've done them nationally, so it was good. Normally, when you do an interview panel in Scotland, you would know the other interviewers because it was people in Scotland but it was all people from the rest of the UK. Now we're doing them remotely, so it was quite interesting. It was good.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
So Jenny, you've shared actually quite a few really kind of insightful or bits of information or facts that I didn't even know today. But do you have like a kind of headline piece of information or a fact that you used either from the sector or your job in general that you think always catches people's attention? Do you want to share it with us?
Yeah, sure. I was going to talk about soils, but we kind of covered that already.
Sorry, did I steal you?
No, you're fine. You're fine. One of the facts that I really like and I think made me sit up and go, oh, I didn't realise that when I heard it. And it was kind of information that Zero Waste Scotland put out during COP26. And it was about the impact that food waste has. And actually, food waste is a bigger contributor to climate change than plastic is. And with 1 kilogram of food waste, produces the same carbon emissions as landfilling 25,000 plastic bottles.
Wow.
So 1 kilogram would be the sort of amount of food waste you might have in your kitchen caddy, depending on the size of your caddy, depending on what you put in it. But the same carbon emissions as landfilling 25,000 plastic bottles. So that really made me think, obviously plastic bottles and that sort of thing get a lot of profile in the press, and
absolutely.
rightly so for various reasons. But there's a lot you can do to reduce that, but equally, there's a lot people could be doing to actually minimizing those carbon emissions from their food waste by, A, not generating in the first place, being better using all their leftovers, etc., and B, making sure that any food waste that's unavoidable, they put in their recycling collections.
That's amazing. I mean, we've talked about that recently, Alistair, haven't we? But just it's actually good to put a number against it and the comparison to the plastic bottles, because I think that's something that helps people visualise it. But I mean, it's a huge frustration. Alistair, we talk about it all the time at Albion, and Alistair as well on your personal LinkedIn and things. It's always back to the food waste, and it's such low participation in Scotland. And just being able to share a fact like that, Jenny, I think is a one that would hope to grab people's attention and say it's not that difficult. The process is actually in place for you. You've got a caddy, you're getting it collected, so
I know.
do your bit.
I don't really understand why people don't want to use it. We often hear, oh, it's the yuck factor, but if you're chucking the food waste out, it's going in your residual bin. Does it matter? Is it more yucky because it's
I would say the yuck
bin?
factor's worse if you put it in your bin. I would say it's
Absolutely.
much worse. I met, I'll not embarrass them by naming him because he's a listener to the podcast. And he said he liked the podcast, etc., and he said the one thing I'll never use is my food waste caddy. And I'm like, why not?
Name and shame.
So, no, I couldn't possibly. And then we had a 10-minute conversation, and I tried to explain why. And he may be using it now, but at that time he wasn't. And I was like,
wow.
I don't understand this. Like every time you mention the public recycling, the first thing they think is plastic. They think the world will be saved by recycling plastic. But plastic, as we know, is quite hard and complicated because of different plastic types and all. And it's really confusing for the public. Whereas food waste is black and white. Food waste is it food? Would you eat it? If you would eat it, it goes in that bin. It's, and everybody, if people don't understand that, well, then we've got a real problem. But and I don't understand this sort of lack of focus on the food waste and the organic stuff, and the constant focus on plastic. And
no,
I don't
I
know.
think some of that was probably down to, the Blue Planet effect, isn't it? You don't, there's been a lot of high profile stuff around the impact
Yeah.
of plastic, and obviously littering is a big problem. But yeah, I don't really understand it either. I had not an argument, but a discussion with a family member on Boxing Day who, oh, we don't bother with food waste because, oh, we don't have that much anyway. And I'm like, even the best, cook in the world, you're always going to have food, unavoidable
Yeah.
food waste. I mean, we eat quite a lot of fruit and veg, and there's, peelings from that. And, okay, I try not to throw out, edible stuff, but ultimately there's always, my daughter likes pineapple, show me how do you eat a pineapple without there being at least as much food waste as there is fruit that you eat.
Yeah, I mean that is the whole point that you're categorised. It's unavoidable. That's the thing. So
Yeah.
you could be the best in the world, but unless you're just going out there and eating it anyway,
Yeah.
it's got to go somewhere.
I think we also need to, sort of increase our expectations of what the public can do and will do if they actually understood. I was at the food waste conference a few weeks ago actually, and somebody from a local authority stood up and said, oh, you can't expect a member of the public to take their mouldy strawberries out the punnet and put the strawberries in their food waste bin and put the punnet in the recycling.
Oh wow.
I have no idea. I mean, that was immediately why can't we? That's not a difficult
Complex, is
thing
it?
to do.
No.
And, come on, we can expect more of the public to be able to do that if they, understood what happens. And I think that's kind of sometimes where we fall down as well, is, letting people know actually what happens to food waste. And certainly some of the comms I've seen, they're very much focused on the energy side of anaerobic digestion.
Yeah.
So, we use your food waste to make energy, which absolutely it does, and that's a great story. But, the other side of it is the fertilizer that we produce and is recycled back to soils where your food is grown. So I always think if we could get that message out there a bit more, then people might care a bit more about what they put in their bin.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think going back to what you were saying earlier, Jenny, I think there is a bigger and bigger appetite for people to find out more. But I think the waste sector as a whole is quite poor at that education piece and that engagement piece. And maybe it's not their piece to do, but there is that thirst of knowledge out there, and that's partly what we're trying to do these podcasts, is try and share some of that information, and that people are interested and they can pick up a bit more, because it's you having that conversation with your relative and saying, why are you not doing that? They might not change, but they will think about it. They will, and it's just that drip of just, you affecting somebody and then affecting somebody else. And I think once people start using a food waste, they would think, well, hang on a minute here, it means my residual waste doesn't stink anymore, because there's hardly anything
actually,
in it.
often it can help change the behaviour and the amount of food they waste in the first place, which can save them money, So if you realise actually, we're throwing out half a loaf of bread every week, well, maybe I don't need to buy a whole loaf of bread, or maybe I need to use my freezer better, or whatever it happens to be. So I think there are lots of benefits. I think, we need to be better in schools at teaching it, from a young age. I've certainly seen, my daughter's done various, sustainability and topics like that throughout primary school. I went in, did the talk about composting. There's even a Peppa Pig episode about composting. So, getting them young, which is good, but doesn't always flow through to adulthood, I don't think. But
yeah, I think that's what we always talk about, is the communication is really hard, and it, going back to what we just talked about of how much our focus is on plastic, even going back a few years, think how much time and money and campaigns have been put out just to get people to the level that they're at today about understanding plastic. So, you've still got all of that to come, and hopefully it will, for looking at food waste. So it's a mammoth kind of battle to, as you say, find a problem that the general public can relate to, and then create campaigns around it. And there's loads at the moment. Everyone's now aware of net zero, but you're also saying about the increased cost of living and how expensive food is. You have to sit and go, okay, that's a focus in the media. Let's start running campaigns about this and get people aware while it's on the top of everyone's minds. But I mean, it's a lot easier said than done. But
I think that the cost of living will definitely have an impact, because
Mhm.
people don't have money to waste food, which and sometimes I get challenged, because obviously I represent people that are recycling the food, and they say, well, why would you want to minimize it, because that's that's ultimately not as much feedstock for
Yeah.
your members. But I always say, there's plenty.
Mhm.
There's plenty unavoidable food waste, and if we were capturing it all, then we absolutely, of course, support the waste hierarchy and everything that's happening to do with food waste minimisation. All the reuse schemes, the too good to goes, the the redistribution. Of course, if there's food that's edible, it should be eaten. We're not talking about that sort of thing. I think what we are talking about is getting the stuff out the residual bin, like you said, and yeah, it's just not easy, is it?
Mhm.
Okay. Any habits or changes you could tell the public about? We've probably talked about them, haven't we? Get your food waste in the residual bin.
Don't put your food waste in your residual bin. Put it in your food waste
Your tea bags
collections.
was a good one. Any other ones?
Yeah, I mean,
everybody will be searching their tea bag now and try to find out where it says plastic, because it's not always very clear whether it's plastic.
It's almost impossible to find out, but just assume that unless it says it's biodegradable, there'll be plastic in there.
We did at one point have a list, but I would dare to say it might not be up to date still.
I was about to say, we definitely have a blog
We do have a list, but we need to.
But I'm now thinking it's a few years that we might have to revisit and
we need to go stalking around the supermarket and try and find the products to see if they're biodegradable.
Yeah. I guess the only other thing I would say is, for the public, if they're buying growing media, just make sure it's peat free. The ban isn't enforced yet, so if you're going, because people buy it because it's cheap, and then that's when the growing media sector say, oh, but there's still demand for it, and it's like, well, does my mum really need peat to fertilize her garden? No, she doesn't. There's other options, but she'll buy it because it's there. So. I mean, that's maybe a bit unfair on my mum. She is quite conscious, but
it's okay.
Throwing your mum under the bus.
Example, Jenny, don't worry.
We can edit that out if you want, Jenny.
We're not judging, but no, I think that's a good one actually. Yeah, on top of all the other ones you've given us throughout, I think that's good.
And what about your favourite jargon, or acronym that you've got?
Yeah.
Or your least favourite?
Well, you've had quite a lot already, haven't you, from various other people, but one I really like is BAT. People sometimes look at me like I'm batty when I'm talking about it. So BAT is best available technique. And it's something that probably, it's not something the general public would be aware of, but certainly people in the industry. There's a big focus on sites operationally that they should be able to demonstrate that they're using the best available technique, pretty much every aspect of their operations, right from stuff coming in the front end through to, emissions from the site, that sort of thing. And, it's been a huge focus over the past few years for a lot of our members, with changing legislation. And it's to try and get people to know that actually, these businesses are not just standing still doing what they've always done. They're constantly doing improvements and, improving how they're working to try and make sure they're using the best available techniques. So they're, minimising the impact on the environment, as well as, trying to do the good work that they're doing, recycling, whatever it is that they're recycling. So yeah. BAT, I think, is mine.
There we go. Good one. That's quite a geeky one, Jenny. That's quite
Sorry.
a geeky one. No, that's all right. That's fine. And it used to be, I'm probably showing my age here. Do you remember when it was BATNIC?
Yes.
So best available technology, not involving excessive cost.
Yeah.
That sounds a bit like a nightclub or something. BATNIC.
There you go. Anyway, so now the part of the conversation where you get to wave your magic wand. What one thing would you like to see?
Yeah. Oh, I could think of loads of things if I had an actual magic wand. If only.
You can have a. We'll let you have two. You can have a really high level one, and then you can have an organics one if you want.
Okay. Well, okay. So basically, I was going to say behaviour change. That's what I would really like to do. It's the hardest thing to do. It's the thing that we spend a lot of time and effort on, making sure that people put the right thing in the right bin, and that can be related to organics, but equally applies to other, recycling streams. If people did the right thing and put the right thing in the right bin, it just makes it so much easier for everyone. You know, it
Is
makes it
it?
easier for the local authorities collecting the stuff. It makes it easier for the sites accepting it, makes it cheaper because they're not having to pay, you know, for contamination. So it might mean that your local authority can, you know, replace the kids' play park or whatever else it is that they need to do. So I think because it's the hard thing, that's where I would save my magic wand for.
Is it behaviour change, Jenny, or is it they just need told that that's what they need to do?
Well, I think, you know, they have been told and people, you know, don't do it. I think we could improve comms for sure. And then there is the sort of cohort of people that want to do the right thing but maybe aren't informed enough, and we might convince those. But I think there's always going to be the sort of, oh, I'm not doing that because it's the council's job, or, you know, people. And I just think, you know, my daughter wouldn't dream of putting something in the bin if she wasn't sure of what went in the bin. So, you know, and she gets it. Why can't everyone? It's not difficult, really. So that's my sort of big one, I guess. One of the other things I was thinking about, if I'm allowed to sneak in another, was
Yeah, we'll let you sneak in.
you
It'll
know,
be nice today.
bin colours.
Since I was late for the start of this.
Thank you. I was going to say, you know, bin colours. Can we just? I know it's spoken about, and you know, it's
was
hard.
that not my one? Did I not use that one?
Did you use that? Oh,
it's all right. We'll let you use it anyway.
You know, just let's have the same bin colours. You know, I know, you know, there's a huge push for consistency and, you know, the recycling charter and everything, but, you know, often someone will say to me, what do I put in my brown bin? And I say, well, what's your brown bin for? You know, where do you live? Because I don't have a brown bin. You know, I've got a green bin for my garden waste. And it just adds to confusion, doesn't it? You know, especially, you know, people that live and work in maybe different local authority areas, different colour bins, and, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I come down to, if I come to the Albion office in here, I mean, it's completely different than where I live, and I come into the office and Alistair's always sometimes he puts a wee message in the work groups chat and he says, who's put this in the wrong coloured bin? And then I think that was my first time in the office and I'm like, oh God, I think that might have been me because I had no idea.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, can somebody tell me what means what down here? And it's funny, like it's, I know, 40 miles along the road from where I live, but it's completely different. And I was like, oh, sorry, I'll hold my hands up. That was me for that one. Because it's just, so simple, but so easy. And especially with it's second nature. I mean, I threw it in the black bin because that's what mine is at home. And then it means something completely different in a different local authority. So
yeah, my black bin's for recycling, so.
Oh, I would be hopeless. Jenny, with you then, I would be making a right mess of your bins.
That's why councils need to start buying our bin app, Jenny. So we've got that. The South Ayrshire Council, we've got a bin app.
Yeah.
People search the item on their phone if they're confused, and it tells them which bin it is. It's not.
I did recommend that to someone recently, actually, because they were like, "Oh, what bin how do I know?" And I was like, "Well, it's not hard."
Well, we have actually we've got a quiz that we've done for the. Probably giving out a story here that I maybe shouldn't, but we have actually got a quiz for the whole of Scotland that we've worked out, so you can do a sort of quiz of work out which bin stuff should go into and test yourself, and it's sort of live at the moment, Heather, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I was actually going to say there. Like even when we were I wasn't going to say, but now you're talking about it. When we were developing the quiz, it was actually much harder than you think to find the information on the council's website. Like I'm going, really okay, like authorities that I've never been to, don't know anything about, don't know anyone there, that I couldn't just send a text and say, what colour bins have you got, what are they for? I'm on their website, I'm pages and pages deep, I'm downloading PDFs just to try and find the colours of bins they use and what goes in them. So yeah, it
shouldn't be that hard, really,
should
it?
Yeah.
There you go. So that's your two then.
Thank you.
I think worthwhile for the two, Jenny.
You're not getting any more than that, that's
it. Yeah. So final question, and I think it's quite a hard one for a lot of people to answer, but just if you had anything small that might help anyone who is willing to follow a similar career path or interested in similar to what you do you have any advice of how to get started, some basic things to know and understand, or where to look?
I think talk to people, you know, do as much networking as you can. I mean, that's definitely benefited me hugely over the years. You know, it's it's what you know, but often it's, you know, knowing the right person to
Yeah.
talk to get that information. You know, get involved with industry groups, so things like, you know, Chartered Institution of Waste Management, you know, join a trade association. Probably should have said that first of all, shouldn't I?
Yeah,
You know,
you
get
maybe
my
should have
job.
it. Is that REA, Jenny?
Yeah. You know, talk to people, and because that's where you'll learn and obviously, you know, see opportunities as well.